style. How'd you like it? Oh yeah? Try my nuts to your fist style. Who's laughing now?
Let me take the time, dedicate a rhyme to those I hold close. The ones I still love, even if my heart froze. Time broke us apart, but some of y'all still down. Though we might have had.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast, the Face the Foot Style podcast. This is PoPo.
And this is the Schmo.
And we're here to talk to you today about mixed martial arts, things that are going on in it. We're just going to get right into it today. We're actually going to try to keep it a shorter episode today. I know that we said that last time and possibly implied that the first time, but this time we're really going to try to keep it down because we're just crunched for time today. So, without further ado, let's talk about the fight card that just happened last Sunday night, UFC Fight Night 81 on Fox Sports 1. And, of course, headlining TJ Dillashaw and Dominic Cruz. Last time that we covered a card and reviewed a card, we started from the bottom up, went from the prelims to the main event. We're actually going to flip that around this time, and we're going to get right into it, talk about the main event because it's been such a conversation piece lately. And, so the main event, TJ Dillashaw and Dominic Cruz. Joe, what did you think of the fight? What did you take away from that?
Yeah, I mean, it was what we said. We said it was going to be a close fight. I think every analyst was trying to figure out the puzzle that is Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw. And first, I must say that they did not disappoint. I mean, the fight was high-paced, high-level. That was about as much of a chess game as we've ever seen in fighting terms. I mean, usually those chess matches, the really complex, high-level stuff you see in the ground game, grappling, jiu-jitsu, but this was a total chess match on the feet, and it was great. Didn't disappoint, but again, many different opinions. I'd say the resounding majority felt that Dominic should have got the nod, as he did, but then again, had TJ had his hand raised, maybe it would have been the other way around. I think, really, it just kind of it tells us that it was a very close fight. So it really depends on how you were watching it, emotions involved, who you were rooting for, but it was close no matter how you looked at it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that I think is a shame. Sometimes I think people are so mired in the fact that their guy lost and so maybe upset, especially when it's a close fight. The bummer thing about it is I think some people are too hung up on the conclusion and they kind of forget how big of a fight, how fun and awesome of a fight it actually was. It's like, yeah, okay, the ending sucked, but the fight itself was great. It's like 25 minutes of, you're glued to the screen action, and because of one announcement at the end, because one person gets to wear a belt and has his hand raised, suddenly the whole fight is lost on you. It's, as far as like you said, the fight itself was a very fun fight to watch. Now, I scored it the same way the judges saw it. I had Dominic winning 3 rounds to 2. I think I felt like Dominic went out. And it was just, I felt like altogether he was outclassing TJ. We covered last time how TJ definitely had the advantage when it came to power, and it was a question as to whether his speed and his agility would be able to match Cruz, because Cruz was the one who laid the foundation for that style for the bantamweights, and TJ has since been given the credit as being basically like Cruz 2.0 or Cruz with knockout power. And so the thing is, we went out there and we saw that, Cruz doesn't have this knockout power, but he's using that speed, that agility in a way that basically canceled out TJ's knockout power. Because the biggest thing that stuck out to me in those first 3 rounds is that he was so elusive, so agile, that TJ was just swatting the air so much. Like, he was missing so much. And I'm not knocking that on TJ, but I felt like he was just so good at his footwork, at his speed, And to make somebody who has looked as good and as dominant as TJ Dillashaw, to make him look like he's just flailing at the air for a big part of that, I thought that just spoke volumes of how ahead of the game Dominic Cruz has been. However, as we've all seen on the stat count, TJ Dillashaw may have missed a lot of shots, but he did land just as many shots on Cruz as Cruz did on him. So it's not that the actual significant strikes were off. It's just that their accuracy percentages were a big difference factor. The other difference factor is that Dominic Cruz took TJ down, I believe it was 4 times. And TJ Dillashaw, up to this point in his career, has never been taken down. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he has such an aggressive style. I think another fact that it has to do with is that he's such a dominant wrestler in his foundation that I just assume some people didn't want to even mess with him on the ground. I could be wrong, but and then TJ came back, of course, really strong rounds 4 and 5. I definitely scored those for him. He started working with the leg kicks and really damaging Cruz. We saw him limping around on that foot. He said that it was something with like a torn ligament, like the muscle that connects your heel to your calf or something like that. I don't know. Cruz seemed to imply that it was a pre-existing injury, but I'm sure a lot of that had to do with the fact that TJ was slamming those bombs on his calf. I don't know. But yeah, and just one more point on Dominic's fast-paced fighting style. I think it was also a big teller of how ahead of the game he was in those first rounds, with the fact that TJ Dillashaw, like I said, who's always looked sharp in every other fight he's had, suddenly was very awestruck. Like, he got frustrated when he couldn't hit Dominic. And when he couldn't hit him, he actually went flat-footed, especially by the third round. Cruz was just dancing all around him, just like peppering him up. And I know we ascribe a lot to damage, but I thought there was some pretty decent damage on TJ's face too by the end. And I don't know, I did see it 3-2, but and while TJ came back in those last 2 rounds very strong, I didn't feel it was enough to edge either of those as a 10-8. And so just mathematically, if I had to pick who won the more rounds, Dominic for sure for me. But that's my take on the fight. Joe, you saw it a different way. So why don't you enlighten us? Let us know why you think and why so many other people agree that TJ should have been the one with the W, or at least gotten a draw.
Okay, I saw it similar. Well, obviously I saw it for TJ, but again, it's not clear cut. But why I feel like he may have earned the nod. As far as even accuracy goes, first round was pretty close, 21% to 33%. It's not a huge gap. 19 punches to 21 total strikes landed in the first round. And man, I don't know. It's just hard to. It's to me. It came down to round 1 because TJ didn't noticeably become frustrated till round 2 and 3. Round 2 and 3, yeah, he was notably frustrated. Strikes were round 2, 16 to 17 punches, 20%, 32% accuracy. TJ then Cruz. So it was close, but the gap started to get a little bit. Well, that was actually about the same percentage gap. And round 3, again, same percentage gap, about a difference of 10% in strikes. But round 3, they had the exact same amount of strikes landed, and Cruz just had 10% more accuracy. So I don't know how big of a margin that is, but it's still pretty close. Either way you look at it, strikes wise. But if we're going to go off of how frustrated Dillashaw looked in round 2 and 3 especially, how he kind of lost his cool. Like you said, he started to look a little tired because he spent most of round 1, 2, and 3 chasing Dominic. And this is kind of what we talked about in the last podcast, that Dominic was going to be a lot more defensive. He's like taken the least amount of hits of any bantamweight in UFC bantamweight history. There's an interesting fact there. TJ landed more strikes in round 1, and round 2, and round 3 than any of Dominic's past 4 fighters. This also includes Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson didn't even land as many strikes as TJ did on Dillashaw. So Dillashaw got hit a lot more than he was used to. 2 guys. This was a Dominic. Yeah, Dominic took more damage than he normally. I wouldn't say damage, but more strikes than he normally takes. Again, both of these guys were kind of put out of their element a little bit. It seemed like Cruz did a lot better of composing himself. He never changed his game, even when he looked hurt, when his leg looked hurt. I don't know if that started in round 3, but I think it was by round 4 that TJ actually had about 18 leg kicks already culminated throughout the fight. So at one point, those leg kicks started to add up, and at round 4, he was noticeably hurt. So, yeah, I mean, I scored round 4 and 5 definitely for TJ, 2 and 3 definitely for Cruz. I mean, round 1 was so close, I would still give TJ the round, mainly because I favor a more aggressive fight style. So where the defensive fighter and the offensive fighter hit each other just as many times, I usually give the nod to the one who had octagon control. Again, TJ had a total of like 3 seconds ground time from all the takedowns, but the takedowns have to count in somewhere. Again, so I mean, what you could say, round 1 was a draw, round 2 and 3 was Cruz. I don't know, it's like you could call the whole fight a draw if you wanted to, but the reason I scored it for him, I would just say round 1, 4, and 5 would have been TJ's. But again, I'm not really upset because the fight was so great, and I can't wait till they add it to a free video on YouTube or on Fight Pass, because I'm going to watch it again. It was freaking sweet. So, yeah, man, it was a good fight. But I mean, that's basically what I've heard. And I'm actually kind of mimicking a little bit from Fighter and the Kid podcast I listened to earlier. Shab actually had it similar scored. But then again, I've listened to plenty of other, like I said, most of it I've heard for Cruz. Let's give props up to the guy who actually did win. And not dwell on who lost, but still, it has to be talked about.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you bring up too. Like, if we're gonna give Cruz a lot of credit for scoring takedowns that no one else has been able to do to Dillashaw, then you equally have to give Dillashaw more credit for landing more blows on Dominic than anybody else has. So that's if you're comparing like what these guys were able to do to each other compared to their past opponents. Yeah, you got to give it up to both of them. So, and also and I kind of got hung up on the fact that TJ got dumbfounded by Dominic's speed and agility in the first 3 rounds, but actually revisiting that, much props to Dillashaw and his corner for getting everything back together, to recognizing the problem, making an adjustment, and then coming out and being as successful as he was in the later rounds, because he didn't let that frustration carry over. They saw what was wrong and they fixed it. So yeah, great fight. Moving on down the card, another fight that I was highly anticipating, Anthony Pettis versus Eddie Alvarez. This one was a fun fight. I know a lot of people are dogging it because they wanted it to be this barn burner brawl. I had a suspicion that Alvarez was not going to do that. I mean, because everybody, of course, is going to reference Alvarez brawling like he did with Michael Chandler and a few other people. But I think people forget that Alvarez comes from a strong wrestling background. And especially in that second Michael Chandler fight, he utilized his wrestling a lot more than he did previously, and that was the one where he got the W. I think with Anthony Pettis, it's been such an obvious chink in his armor. All the guys that have taken him apart have done it, with wrestling. I mean, and Joe Rogan said it on the live feed while we were watching the fight. This was a foundation laid by Clay Guida, of all people, because here comes Pettis from WEC, fights Clay Guida, and he loses. He was not on a winning streak for a long time in the UFC, and because Clay Guida laid that foundation. And so Eddie Alvarez was just taking a page out of that book. And I don't know. And I know this is really reaching, but I'm just going to point it out because once again, I get kind of peeved every once in a while when I try to talk to people about MMA and they think MMA is entirely the UFC. And of course, Bellator. When you bring up Bellator, they're always going to bring up the Kimbo Slice versus Ken Shamrock freak show fights. But not even realizing, hey, there's a lot of legitimate athletes in that promotion, and unfortunately, they get. People just take it at face value. They only want to look at the main event. But Eddie Alvarez was definitely one of those top tier talents that Bellator had. And here's an example because, and like I said, I'm really reaching on this. So if you hate me for making this comparison, you have every right to. But here's Eddie Alvarez. I believe he was champion at the same time that Anthony Pettis was champion. And so if we're taking this fight as definitive, which it definitely wasn't because it was super close. A lot of people are upset with the decision. But if you were wondering, hey, who's the best in the world right now, you could have at that moment said, based on this fight, that Eddie Alvarez, the Bellator champ, could beat Anthony Pettis, the UFC champ. Bellator had the better fighter in the world. That's a super stretch. I know that's a dumb thing to say, and I know that this fight could have gone either way, but I'm just saying it because I thought that was an interesting fight. The point is that Bellator has some top-tier talent, and don't sleep on them just because they're not behind the Joe Rogan promos and the Dana White press conference. But anyways, that's neither here or there. Joe, how did you see that fight? What did you take away from it?
Yeah, man, that fight was pretty good. And again, I was the same as you. I didn't think it was going to be that slobber knocker that a lot of people may have thought it might have turned into, or at least that Alvarez wasn't going to be as aggressive, I guess, as you'd seen him in past fights. But kind of what we talked about before, Alvarez has got a superb wrestling background, and he does this in a lot of his fights, so it wouldn't have been out of character to see him do it in this fight. And I don't really recall what you and I talked about last time about breaking it down, or if we did bother break it down too much. But I kind of suspected fight night that Alvarez was going to try to do something similar to a Rafael dos Anjos or a Clay Guida and try to just pin up Pettis, put a lot of pressure. I mean, Gilbert Melendez also tried it. But I did think we were going to see a little bit sharper Pettis, and he did. He looked good. He looked really good. And again, it was another split decision, and it was another close fight. I'd still think Alvarez was, for the most part, the aggressor. He had a lot more octagon control. Again, that's not a huge factor, but I mean, given a close fight, that's something you've got to think about. Pettis did start to turn it around a bit. I mean, his leg kicks are vicious and so shadowed, it's hard to see those kicks coming. And so, but it was crazy because at some points it seemed like a kicking battle where one guy would kick the other and then the other one would respond with their own kick. Because Alvarez, I think, is the one who even opened up and initiated the kicking game. Was throwing a lot of kicks, and then Pettis started doing his thing, and you're just waiting any second that somebody's going to break a rib or get head kick KO'd. I mean, it was suspenseful. It was a good fight. It was awesome. I already had it for Alvarez more or less, but I thought Pettis might get the nod before they announced the winner. So, but hats off to both of them. Can't wait to see Pettis fight again. Can't wait to see if Alvarez is going to get a title shot off of this. Who knows? I mean, he's faced three top-tier UFC opponents. He's beaten 2 out of the 3 of them. Two former champions he defeated and lost to, Donald Cerrone. Again, who knows if it was nerves or what, but I mean, Cerrone's a tough guy. Either way, the last 3 guys have all been UFC elite top 5 fighters. Yeah,
I mean, he just beat the former champ, current number 1 contender. He just beat that guy. Then he, before that, he beats Gilbert Melendez on steroids. I mean, that alone is, come on, man. I know where, there's a certain point where you have to separate this between entertainment and a sport. And if you want to look at this, if you want to look at the UFC or MMA as a sport, then by all means, let's reward the people who are doing better in the sport. We don't want the most popular teams to show up to the Super Bowl. We want the ones who are winning the most in the seasons to show up to the Super Bowl to determine who was the best this season. And that's the way I see it for the fight game too. It's like, come on, I want Eddie Alvarez to get this title shot because he's the one out there winning right now in this weight class. And so, I mean, and the caliber of people he's beating couldn't be higher right now. So,
oh yeah,
I agree.
No, definitely.
So
jumping down, if you're done on. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the Alvarez Pettis fight?
Nope. Yeah. Move on down.
So we've got. I don't know why this. Okay, I do know why. So Travis Browne defeated Matt Mitrione via third round TKO. This has been passed around a lot as kind of some huge controversy. I mean, it's not like being eye poked is a terrible thing. It is bad. Point deducted.
Yeah,
for one or two.
For those who didn't watch it. It was a back and forth fight in the first round and a half, but Travis Browne ended up poking Matt Mitrione in the eye accidentally twice, and they were pretty game-changing eye pokes. But Joe, complete your thought, just for those who didn't see the fight, who may not know what we're referencing.
Yeah. So
continue.
Yeah. So anyway, Travis Browne had two eye pokes throughout the fight. Same eye, and that in itself looked bad. But here, look, Spencer and I have talked about this. PoPo and I have talked about this, and take 2 points away. Okay, let's just say he had 2 points taken away for both of those eye pokes. Who got knocked out? Matt Mitrione. So points didn't matter, or
it wasn't a decision.
Again, look, Matt Mitrione was also given an out twice. So first time he said, "Hey, can you see?" First time Matt Mitrione eventually got his vision back. He's like, no, I'm good. Second time he got poked in the eye, I believe, which was like, a 30-second, 40-second delay before the fight got stopped, which was really weird. That was definitely bad reffing at that point. Not saying he's a bad ref, but that was a bad call because, look, he poked him in the eye, and then why 45 seconds later stop it? He already let him go. So it's either it happened or it didn't. That was weird, but it happened. And when Mitrione, again, was asked by the doctors, I think he said he couldn't see out of that eye.
He was asked by the ref.
And
yeah, he's asked by the ref and asked by the doctor on both occasions.
Yeah, and they're like, can you keep going?
If he could continue.
And he wanted to. Again, awesome, props. He's a tough guy. He obviously wanted to put on a show. He didn't want to disappoint fans by saying, no, I'm not good. So it sucks for Mitrione, and I'm not knocking on him for that. But he was given an out to stop the fight so they could call it a no contest, so we could have moved on from that, and he could have got his justice, if that's what people are seeking. There's his justice. Justice was served because everybody was given the opportunity to either stop or continue the fight at that point. And it was all in Mitrione's court, and Mitrione was like, nah, I got this. So he got on the show in our behalf, and I'm happy he did. But I'm not happy the way that people are just getting all crazy on Travis Browne. I mean, he's not notorious for his eye pokes.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. There's definitely a few fighters out there who are very
utilize it a lot more frequently. I mean, John Jones even admitted it on Twitter. And I'm sure, I don't know if he kept it out there. I'm sure he deleted it like he always does. But John Jones during the fight even said, "Ha, he's using my favorite move." Because everybody John Jones loves that eye poke. And here's the thing: if there's anything that can be taken from this fight. If there's anything that can be taken from it, I think it's the fact that maybe there has to be a little bit of a rule change in certain areas, because the referee, I don't think, was technically wrong in any of this for letting it continue. Maybe he was wrong for not deducting a point. That's neither here nor there, because it came down to a finish. There was no decision. So if he deducted 2, 3, or 4 points, it doesn't matter because Matt Mitrione got TKO'd. And so, but if you're going to take anything from it, I think Matt Mitrione said in a statement later on that he's like, of course I want to continue the fight, because if he doesn't, he risks losing the other half of his paycheck. I think that's something that needs to be changed. And Chael Sonnen's talked on this before, where he's like, look, you get paid a certain amount to risk your body and your livelihood, and then they kind of tease you by saying, oh, but you don't get the other half of your money if you lose. And it's like, look, we already took the risk, we already got beat up, we did the job. I don't see why the result is affects your paycheck when we've done the work, but whether or not you're satisfied or whether or not someone raises our hands, you don't have to pay us the other half of our money. And so that's something that should be said. So I get why Matt wanted to continue, because that is his livelihood. He's like, well, I'm getting beat up, but I don't want to just say no to my money. Yeah, and I can see that. But I think the other thing that has to be taken from this is there's no mandatory minimum timeout if you get poked in the eye. Matt Mitrione said, let me just take my 5 minutes. And the referee, I believe, corrected him, said, no, if you can tell me right now if you can continue or no, because after they confirm that, they start the fight again. If you get kicked in the crotch, you get a minimum 5 minutes to decide. Like, you can just sit there, take your time, regain your composure, and then after 5 minutes, the ref can ask you, can you continue? And I think even then, the ref has the option to extend and give more time. With the eye poke, no, it's like, can you continue or not? If not, then the fight's over. So I think that's kind of a bummer. I think poke in the eye, especially having longer repercussions of getting kicked in the crotch, it warrants a 5 minute timeout more so. Or I'm not saying take away the 5 minutes from the crotch kick. I'm just saying let's give these guys the proper time to recompose themselves. But anyways, yeah, that was my thoughts on that fight. You want to add anything else to that?
No, that's exactly what we wanted to cover. And
all right.
Just to kind of point out, I mean, we are good, wanting to keep this short, but and these last few. Okay, everyone.
I only want to touch on one more fight.
Undercard fights and the main fight. We've got, and I'm just going to run through the list what we have here. And Francisco Trinaldo versus Ross Pearson, good fight. Patrick Cote versus Ben Saunders, good fight. Luke Saunders versus Maximo Blanco, amazing fight. Paul Felder versus Darren Cruikshank, another really good fight. Alir Latifi versus Sean O'Connell, another good fight. I mean, well, very fast fight. And Rob Fonte or whatever Font versus Joey Gomez, crazy fight. I mean, the last one I didn't catch it. Francimar Barossa versus Elvis Mutapit. I can't even pronounce his name. Top Kitch. Anyways, all of those fights I just named are worth watching. So if these are ever available or within your scope of catching any of these fights, they're all worth watching it. So yeah,
for sure, check them out. And exactly. So we're gonna leave UFC Fight Night 81 at that. We're just gonna touch on one or two other news items right now. I think the biggest, we're of course subjective with this, but to me the biggest news that's come out since the fight card is the announcement of the return of the Prodigy BJ Penn. Baby J is back, and he wants to be bigger than ever. But this is not the first time that BJ Penn has returned or tried to make a resurgence in his career. I'm a huge BJ Penn fan. I believe most people who have respect for the sport or the athletes who paved the way to make it what it is now. Of course, BJ Penn is always mentioned in that category. Joe, what are your first thoughts when you first heard about this, or what's your opinion on it now that you may have looked into it more?
Well, yeah, I mean, my thing, I don't know why I always go back to Hollywood on this one, to Balboa, his last film before Creed, but his last film starring Rocky as a main character. He has that really emotional, dramatic scene when he's trying to get his licensure for the last time to box. And he gives this huge spiel on it, but basically it's like, look, this is what fighters do. And if this is what this person wants to do with his life, okay, fine, let him do it. Will the UFC let him back in? That's the question. He's a pioneer. He's a big draw, and if the UFC wants to make money, yeah, they'll probably get behind him. And my only thing is, let's let him fight. Let's ease him back in. I mean, if he's game, let's throw him in with some other veterans that, like a Dan Henderson versus Vitor Belfort type of fight, where we've got two veterans that's got scores to settle. There's a lot of fights to be made that direction, where a lot of these guys are at similar points in their career. I don't believe he's ready for a Frankie Edgar fight, not even close, especially after the result of their last well, 3 fights. And
I don't need to see that again.
Yeah,
that was
now Diego Sanchez was the first one who came to my mind since Sanchez has made the move down to featherweight. I think BJ Penn made a hint at coming that direction, either 145, 155. But I would be a fight I'd love to see. Probably at 155, I'd like to see him fight. Even though Diego Sanchez does have another fight booked right now. But by the time BJ returns, I'd love to see that, man. I'd love to see it because it's skill set wise, veteran status wise. There's a lot to be said in that category, and that'd be a fight I'd love to watch.
You know what? And I hadn't considered that until you mentioned it. And once you mentioned that, I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Because Diego Sanchez, as much as I love the guy, he's not looked impressive, and even his wins as of late are very questionable. I know a lot of people are universally upset that he even got the nod when he fought Ross Pearson. But the guy is a fan favorite. People love to watch Diego Sanchez, and he's tried to make adjustments, tried to move down to featherweight, all this stuff. And to his credit, he does keep getting beat by the best in the divisions. His first fight at featherweight, first and only fight at featherweight, was Ricardo Lamas, and he looked great as far as he never flinches on his savagery and his aggression, but he got picked apart in that fight. There is no conceivable way that you could see him winning that fight. I agree. I think Diego Sanchez versus BJ Penn is a must if you're going to bring BJ back. What do you make of this whole business of him calling out Chris Lentz? Because the way that started originally is, I think PJ was just looking for an excuse to get back in. The guy is a natural-born fighter. He doesn't like sitting at home and just growing taro and making poi. He does like doing that stuff, but the guy misses fighting so much. Every interview that he had while he was in his retirement phase, he just sounded bummed. They interviewed him even shortly after they inducted him into the UFC Hall of Fame. He's very bummed talking about fighting because he just wishes he was still out there. And so he called out Chris Lentz, I think initially because he still had a bone to pick with Mike Dolce.
Nick Lentz?
Because Mike Dolce, he blames a lot for his non-success in his last Frankie Edgar fight. Doesn't like Mike Dolce, and he said Lentz is kind of his poster boy.
I think you meant Nick Lentz. Nick
Lentz? Oh, yeah. You know what? Chris. Yeah, I said Chris Lentz, huh? Yeah, Nick Lentz. Sorry, excuse me. Ignore all that other stuff. Listen to the podcast again, and every time that I say Chris Lentz, realize that you need to replace that mentally with Nick. Nick Lentz. And so, he had a bone to pick with Dolce. He called out Lentz as a result, and it's just kind of spiraled from there, where now he's starting to, poke at him a little bit. Lentz is taking the shots back. He's made a poem about BJ clowning on him and stuff like that. It's been kind of funny going back and forth. Do you think that would be the good reintroduction fight for him coming back into the UFC?
Yeah, Lentz is a good fighter. He's definitely on the level of being really good. He's just another one of those guys who's kind of at that point where he could get a title shot, but he kind of falls short every time. He had a chance to beat Chad Mendes, lost via unanimous decision. Then he beat this Manny Gamburian, another tough guy, but he won.
Oh yeah.
And then he fought the great Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira actually got him in a submission in the third round.
That was a brutal fight.
But he's tough, dude. And then his last fight in December, he just took on Danny Castillo and won via split decision. He's not out. He's an active fighter. Why not? I wouldn't mind him taking on BJ Penn. It could only help Lentz's stock definitely go up if he had a BJ fight. And I think BJ could have a lot to gain as well because Lentz is, again, he's a contender in a sense. He's a top 10, top 15 fighter for sure. I wouldn't even say top 15. I'd say top 10 fighter at least. It's a tough division too, but it's a definitely good place to start if you're gonna start there. Sure, if the Diego fight doesn't happen, I would want to see this.
Yep. And, just some final thoughts on this. I agree. I think Lentz would be a fun fight to have. Like I said, BJ has just been torn apart in his last performances, so I still get nervous pairing him up against top talent, because that's the thing. I love BJ Penn. I will watch any of his fights, but that was painful to watch him fight Frankie Edgar that last time. And Frankie Edgar didn't even want to inflict that much pain and damage on the guy. He gave him his shot again at 45 because BJ was still looking for a relevant fight, basically. And Frankie Edgar's like, yeah, my name got big because I beat him. He was gracious enough to accept a fight from me when I was on my way up. Why would I not fight BJ at this point? But man, did that really come back to bite BJ. And I don't know if I want to see that damage anymore. But a hopeful thing that's coming from this is that BJ seems to be doing it right, because his problem in the past, his accusations in the past, have always stemmed from the fact that he's done usually camps on his own where he seems to be surrounded by a bunch of yes men, people that he is affiliated with at home that aren't going to tell him the hard stuff. I mean, and the best success of his career is when he's working with coaches, with striking coaches and etc., where they just don't want, where they are willing to tell him, no, don't do that, do this. But in his last few camps, he's kind of severed his ties with them, and he's just not looked good since. So this time, he is training at the Jackson Winklejohn camp, which of course is a good move for anybody, because they are just, their record speaks for itself. Look at all the champions that fall under their guidance. I'm not going to go into depth about it here, but he said in an interview that he told Jackson Wink to, he told Jackson Wink that if I don't look good in training, just tell me. If I look like, hey, you know what, you just don't got it anymore, just tell me. And I think if Jackson Winklejohn give their approval, if they put their stamp of approval saying, no, BJ still got it, that gives me a little more confidence about it. But that might present problems also with the Diego Sanchez fight, because Diego trains with them as well. But, that's something way further in the future. We'll see if it pans out. Joe, any last thoughts on this?
No, man, it's been said. It really has.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Like I said, we're keeping this one short, and we just want to thank you for your support listening. That's the podcast for this week. We did have a question in the comment section of our last one. I promise we're going to get around to answering it. We just don't have time to get to it today. So if anybody else has any questions or anything specifically you want us to address, by all means, please leave us that message in the comment section. Thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in. This is PoPo saying thanks. Schmo, you got to say anything to say?
Appreciate anybody who is actually listening to the show. You rock.
All right, sounds good. You have a good week, everybody. Bye.
I rose from the California concrete close, rallies defeated, arresting at my drop dimes, and I'm turning my cheek, keeping my tongue in my cheek. Wear the warrior tee, cause they come and they go. Where the change springs, some of the code, side for the fam, end up standing alone. Puffing nose into the ozone, stuck in my salute the real mother effer cologne. All my sins I own, and keep with me till the day I'm redeemed. Take for a real oost to know what I mean.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
It's been a minute, dog, I heard you got kids. Fresh out the pen, so I heard you got big. Still holding down the west side, yeah, that's my brother. Remember them school days, lunchtime, scrapping over colors. Middle finger to the principal, I miss them times. Used to skip class and get high and kick them rhymes. Then I dropped out, packed up and moved out south. Rag tie, got the thuggin' and mobbing like yuck mouth. Flag high, so you know what we bout. Don't ask why, gang signs get thrown in the air when you pass by. Before the old markets closed at Mannix, there was the spot. Go cop a fresh tea and go